Thank you very much, Mark. Welcome, everybody. We're delighted to invite you here this evening, to have so many of you at such short notice, and also to have the glass sellers join us, because together we share an affiliation with HMS Artful, and we're thrilled that they've been able to give up some of their time at home to spend an hour or so with us. And none of this would have been possible had they not been to our recent event with where's David Roots? David Roots leading them astray in a pub somewhere, no doubt. But we're really delighted that they've agreed to do this, and so pleased to have all of you here. So without any further ado, I'll hand you over to David to introduce the people who will be talking to us today. Over to you, David.
Good evening, everybody. Very warm welcome to the three guys from Artful, and we're very grateful for them taking the time out to talk to us this evening. I can't see them on the screen, but unless they've moved places, we have got William on your left, Lou in the middle, and Lewis are both all from Artful. And I will ask Lou first, I think, if I may, if she could just give us a broad outline, because I believe she had a special responsibility through the pandemic for looking after COVID patients.
Yeah.
So over to you, Lou, if you can hear me.
If you want.
Hi,
Got main speaker.
hopefully everyone can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah, so yeah, my name's Louina Thomas, by all means call me Lou. I'm the Petty Officer Medical Assistant on board. So my responsibility on board is looking after all personnel on board, as they are my patients. So I see them for any medical issues. My other responsibilities are to do with atmosphere, so controlling the atmosphere, making sure we have a breathable atmosphere on board, and also with radiation protection, so ensuring radiation levels are at reasonable amounts and don't get too high, and obviously to protect all the crew on board. My time on board recently has been very busy due to a COVID outbreak. Obviously COVID-19 has spread across the UK, and also on board seagoing platforms. So whilst we were away, I had to deal with patients becoming ill with COVID-19 at sea. That was quite daunting, especially without a doctor on board, and sort of taking charge of that by myself.
That sounds amazing. So how do you isolate on a submarine?
Yeah, very good question, and it's very tricky, and I had lots of discussions with the command team about the best plan for that, and luckily we had an area where we could fit other people, and it's sort of other bunk space that we use for extra personnel on board. So we moved them out, and I moved my patients in. I started with a low number, so it was achievable, and I managed to isolate them, and then however, obviously it was going to spread throughout the submarine because we're on a submarine. So things did relax, and we just all had to embrace COVID-19 and do the best we could. But in the meantime, directly, I tried to isolate it the best I could with what I had on board.
All right, so you didn't do, as our clerks just suggested, throw them up the torpedo tube?
No. I mean, if I could have, I would have, but probably wouldn't gone.
They did on Vigil, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much, Lou. I'm sure we'll have a lot more questions for you later. So, William, can I ask you what you do on the boat, please?
Hi there, good evening everyone. My name is William Baker, and I'm the Communication Information System Engineer, or SISE, of HMS Artful. So I'm in charge of essentially maintaining or overseeing the maintenance and the upkeep and the operation of all of our communications equipment. So obviously as a submarine, we have to receive our orders and be able to do that in such a way that we're not counter detected as we do it. So communications and the way that we talk, whether it be through encryption or other methods, is incredibly important. Also, as a kind of a more generic weapons engineer, I'm responsible for the explosives we take on board. I'm one of the fire control officers. So whenever we're firing torpedoes or Tomahawk cruise missiles, I'll be some of the team that is involved in the firing and the control of those weapon systems. And generally, as an engineer, now that we're alongside, it's where I'm surprisingly enough actually busiest. It's making sure that the platform is in a fit state to go to sea, and that all of our communications, weapon systems, sonar, and all of our computing equipment is ready to go for when we leave the wall.
All right. You don't do much then, really?
Yeah, one or two things.
Sounds amazing.
And very much a jack of all trades.
And how about you, Lewis?
So I'm the navigator on board, which is probably the most obvious job of what I do. So I navigate the submarine basically from A to B. So the Navy will task us with various tasks and tell us we have to be in a certain place at a certain time. So it's my job on board to plan the routes from A to B, get us there on time, and then also in charge of dive safety. So when we're dived, making sure we're keeping out of other submarines areas and other shipped areas, so effectively we don't hit anything. Is my main job.
Do they have the same as what you do in RAF anti-submarine aircraft? Do you have we used to call them route navigators and tactical navigators? So have you got two sets of navigators on board?
So my role on board, the navigator, does all the sort of the safety side, and then the one job above me, the watch leader, is then in charge of the tactical exploitation of the environment. So I've got a route which tells you need to be here, and they'll choose the route and go around the route to make it as tactical as possible, basically. And they'll do all the sort of war fighting thoughts of that end.
Oh, right, okay. On broader issues, but when you decide to go into the submarine service, the recruiting process, do they recruit you from Civvy Street as prospective submariners, or do you actually join up in the Navy and then you're streamed off? And if you are streamed off, what kind of qualities do you think they're looking for?
So certainly you can apply as a direct entry submariner, and I think that makes up, I would estimate, probably about half of the applicants to the submarine service. The other half will be picked up normally through like your initial military training. There's a lot of kind of catchment programs because it's quite hard to get information about submarines due to the nature of what we do out to the general public. And
yeah, sure.
The vast majority of people that apply tend to go for the more visible aspects of the Royal Navy. And then while they're in their kind of phase one training, their basic training, that's when we hit them with all the propaganda and try and get them to come over to the dark side, as it were. But it's no, I think we're not looking for anything in particular. Obviously, if you're claustrophobic, probably not the best, probably not the correct best course steer. But no, it's just being able to muck in and teamwork. It's really kind of those Royal Navy values. We just, I would say, maybe take them a little bit further than our surface counterparts.
When you're actually through the process and you got your dolphins, are you then a submariner for the rest of your naval career, unless you choose to go out of it? I mean, there's no fixed tour. That's.
So I think as soon as you've got your dolphins, you're always a submariner because you've earned your dolphins, and that's the process of doing it. Most career paths take you through the different ranks of staying in the submarine stream. So I think most of us will do submarines for the majority of our career, but there are lots of sort of bits through your career where you can change to do surface or change to do different things. But usually the sort of the sausage factory of the Navy is you do one job, you go away and do a course, you come back and do the next job up, and then that just goes up and up and up until you either get fired for being rubbish or sort of get to where you want to be. Really.
I like that one, fired for being rubbish. When you actually go on a deployment, do the crew generally know how long they're going away for, or is it an open-ended subject which the captain just knows?
So submarines get programmed for set tasks. So you'll go away and do a particular task. So last year we sailed in March time, and we knew we were going to go away and do a submarine command course, which is the course that qualifies for new captains to drive submarines. So we knew we were going to go away and do that, and we were expecting to be back about sort of mid-June time. And then because we were the only submarine at sea, another submarine broke, so we had to take their tasking instead. So we ended up going to the Mediterranean as well, and taking Queen Elizabeth, the carrier, through the Med, and doing all their stuff in the Med before then carrying on with a different submarine. So you tend to go away knowing roughly how long you're going to be, but then there's always a caveat as if something else breaks or plans change and you're at sea, you're very likely to pick up extra tasking. So we ended up coming back in the beginning of August, so it's all got extended by sort of 2 months extra. And it depends what sort of tasks you're doing. Some tasks you go away and you know exactly how long you're going to be, but on the whole it requires a relief, so another submarine to sail to come out to relieve you so you can go alongside. And quite often most submarines are delayed because of maintenance or other issues, so you kind of know how long you're going to be, but it's probably plus or minus maybe 2 or 3 months. Probably it's probably a good estimate. So the submarine's due to go away to sea very shortly, and we've been given a date when we're due to come back. But most people tell their families probably 3 months after the date that we get told, because there's nothing worse than your family's expecting you to come back and then suddenly you don't hear anything more from them for an extra 2 months. As people tend to add on a couple of months, because then if you come back earlier, so it's a nice surprise and it's good.
Logistics must be an absolute nightmare, catering wise. We're not just catering bits and pieces, stores, etc. I did meet one of the logistics officers when I last came up, and he said it was actual breeze. I don't believe him for a minute. So how do they get away with that then? How do they do it?
I think, well, you've got to manage it the best you can. Obviously, we have that set date of when we anticipate to be back, and that's what we will plan for. So we'll make sure we have enough for there. And then if circumstances will change, they always do, and then we just have to try and accommodate as best we can to keep ourselves going. If that means rationing food, we'll ration food, because ultimately that's probably the thing that will keep us at sea longer if we've got the food. Fuel's not an issue, so yeah, as long as we've got food, we're good to go.
So when I was in the Air Force, I did an unaccompanied tour, 12 months, and we were supplied by the Royal Fleet Auxiliary, and we knew when the boat was close to us because we went down to the budget beer and the sausages. So are you saying that a week in, when the lobster disappears, you're back to baked beans on toast?
I think the food on board is actually surprisingly quite good.
Yeah.
So obviously you start off with lots of fresh food, which is really good, which runs out quite quickly, obviously. I think again,
Lewis, we can't hear you.
Sorry. So I think the food on board tends to be quite good. You start off with fresh food for the first couple of weeks, and then obviously that runs out after the first couple of weeks. And it depends what sort of operations you do. Again, we were lucky with our last trip. We went into Gibraltar twice in quite short succession, so we were able to get on fresh food. And it also depends on how good the chefs are. So we were very lucky. The chefs we went to sea with last time were really, really good. I actually gained 6 kilograms whilst being at sea. It was just really, really good. But then if you go on operations where you can't store up quite so much, you're then on just sort of basics, pasta and rice, and they have like wrap packs like the army have, but like big ones, and it's basically just like, well, I don't even know what it is, but like mysterious meat and like potatoes, which they sort of heat up, which gets a bit dodgy then. But on the whole, it's quite good. But when you do get extended, and you have to start rationing, then it starts getting quite sad.
So I think we got through. I think it was 1.5 tons of fillet steak at the last trip. That was one of the stats I remember as we were coming in. So yeah, we do all right where we can, but
1.5 tons of steak. Oh. What about living conditions? I'm sure they're 5-star, but how many beds do you have to share with on a shift?
Well, I'd just like to say I've probably got the best bed on board. So being not because I'm female at all, so because I'm medical, all my medical equipment is around my bed. So I don't have anyone below me, don't have anyone above me. And my bed, I'm only 5'2", so I actually have a fold-out stool so I can get in my bed because it's nice and high. Yeah, I've got the best bed on board, but I'm sure these guys will tell you about their accommodation.
But again, it depends sort of like where you are on the submarine service. So when you first join, you haven't got your dolphins, so you're not qualified. So you tend to hot bunk, so 2 people share the same bed. Because submarine do 6 hours on, 6 hours off of the shifts, there's only ever half a submarine up at any one time. So basically 2 people can share the same bed because one person's up doing the job and one person's in their bed. And then every 6 hours you swap, then one person gets in the bed and the other person's up. So you tend to do that until you get your dolphins. And then once you're qualified and get your dolphins, it depends sort of what mess you're in. So forward, for most people, there's two 22-person bunk spaces, basically. And they're like triple bunk beds that you sleep in. And then there's different bunk spaces, like the senior rates have a different size bunk space, and the officers have sort of like an 8-man bunk space the share. But you tend to get your own bunk once you're qualified, unless you've got an operation where you take loads and loads of extra people, like special forces or riders or people to assess you, and then lots more people then start to have to start hot bunking. But it's basically just like bunk beds, and you only, once you're in your bed, you sleep. So it doesn't really need to be very nice because you just sleep in them.
Now, a typical military environment, except you can't get out the door when somebody cheeses you off. So how do you approach that? Is there somebody who's overseeing you just to make sure the morale is still good, or how do you handle that?
So I think the Navy's quite good in general in that we've got a lot of kind of separate systems. So you'll have like your divisional system, which is kind of your more formal chain of command that you can kind of professionally gripe to if that's where you want to go. But I think as a ship's company, and Artful's quite good at this, I'd say maybe beyond other units, we're very good at just kind of mucking in and getting around each other and making sure that everyone's all right. There's because you don't get a lot of personal space if someone is typically having a problem or finding life a bit hard. It's quite hard for other people to miss, and you don't tend to do very well at sea if you're not the type of person that's going to ask someone if they're okay or be receptive to that. And so yeah, it's just a matter of talking to each other and kind of talking stuff out, because yeah, if you go banging off the walls with each other, you're just going to end up exactly where you were 5 minutes beforehand. So
is that like a buddy scheme, or have you got a padre on board?
No, I know some boats do take a padre sometimes if they have the space available. I'd say probably my role on board, I do see a lot of patients will come in just to chat, especially in regards to mental health. That's probably one of the most things I see. Yeah, a lot of. But I always offer my lab where I work as a safe space. I always offer it to anyone that if they just want some time out, they can come, because I can shut the door and I know no one's going to come in, because that's where I treat my patients, and they can talk to me, they can not talk to me, and they can just sit there and have a moment to themselves.
And I suppose there's a lot of banter. Is there banter in between different disciplines, like the engineers, the navigators, the medics and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Absolutely, and I don't think any of it is repeatable here.
I wasn't really expecting to get an answer on that one, to be honest with you. And your families, your loved ones, when you leave behind whilst you're at deployment, it must be very difficult for them. Do they get any help?
So yeah, when the submarine goes away, usually a proportion of the crew stay behind. It's called fifth watch, and usually there's a nominated officer or senior rate in that, and they're a contact not just for the boat but for the families as well. So if there's any issues back home, they'll get in contact with the fifth watch officer, and then they can communicate with the boat if required. So worst case scenario, if something awful happens, you can try and get someone off the submarine to go back home to do whatever. But also just support the families if anyone's having hard times or if stuff comes up. It's just a liaison with the Navy to sort of help that. And there's obviously a number of charities and communities in the local area but also help families as well.
Yeah, I think it's probably much harder for the families that we leave behind, because when we go away, we're busy. 6 hours on, 6 hours off. The time flies most of the time anyway. But it's the people we leave behind that are sat there kind of watching and waiting for us to come back. I think it's much harder for them.
Body clocks. Obviously, you're shift workers, so it really. I suppose you said if you're a factory worker, you're a shift worker, and it doesn't really matter. But you don't see daylight. So how does that affect your body clock?
Yeah, well, for me personally, it takes me about approximately 2 to 3 weeks when I come back to readjust to just a normal routine, especially because you're doing that 6 hours off, 6 hours on. My sleep pattern just goes out the window when I get home, and yeah, it probably takes at least 2 weeks to get back into a normal routine for me. And yeah, not seeing daylight definitely affects my eyes. I have to wear sunglasses probably. It depends what time of year you're coming back in, but if it's summertime, yeah, sunglasses are straight on because it's a bit too bright.
Brilliant. Master, would you like to pop in? Have you any questions you've got tucked up your sleeve?
The first thing, going on what you've just said, presumably, do you have sort of artificial lights that it does replicate daylight in some areas?
No, we don't actually. I know this has actually been looked at on other submarines across different countries, and they do have it. But no, I don't, like our lighting is just, it's probably not the brightest either. And because of the nature of people being asleep pretty much all the time, there's always someone in bed. We'll probably reduce lighting a lot of the time. So you'll go into your bunk space. I think, well, I know I can speak for myself. You're pretty much walking in the dark, and I just know where my stuff is because you dare turn the light on because obviously someone else is in bed. So yeah, it's a lot dimmer.
That's interesting. And presumably the 6 hours are regulated. Some of you are getting up at breakfast time, whereas others, if you others are going to bed. Do you sort of have breakfast before you go to bed, or do you sort of wait till you get up, or?
Yeah, no, you do. It's the strangest jet lag when you get back. Like, yeah, you'll wake up in the morning to have a full like roast dinner, or like you'll go to bed having just had like your breakfast. It's a very weird set of meals, and depending on which watches, so the watches will either be 1 to 7 or 7 till 1. So if you're in first watch, you'll do 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. and then 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. And that one's all right because I think that's the easiest to jump in and out of, because when you get back, you're just a bit sleepy in the afternoon. But the other one will absolutely, yeah, it'll mess you up because you'll be ready to go to bed, and then it'll hit midnight and suddenly you're wide awake again. That one takes a bit more getting used to.
But do they have, you have the option? Do you have, you're waking up, so you have breakfast, or everybody gets the same sort of, this time of the day we serve breakfast, so whether you go to bed or not,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all the same. So yeah, like he's just said, you could literally be waking up and eating a curry. And yeah, it's bizarre. Or for me personally, I had it while I was eating a full roast dinner with trifle and then going to bed on a very full stomach.
Wow. It's difficult, isn't it?
It's a hard life.
But whilst you're away, do you sort of have, obviously a lot of the time you are under the surface, so you don't make contact at all, but somewhere along the line, do you keep in touch with family and get posts, or?
Yeah, so it depends what operations you're doing. So if you're not in like an operational environment, we tend to return to periscope depth, so just under the surface, sort of 2 or 3 times a day. Stick a mast up to get some communications in. First of all, obviously for our operation, but also it allows us to ping a couple of emails off and receive a couple of emails.
All
so
right.
if you're sort of, depending on what operations you're doing, you could receive and send maybe 1 or 2 emails each day. And then when you're on the surface, people rotate around to go up into the fin, and you go on their mobile phones and all that sort of stuff. But sometimes if you're on a particular operation or in a particular area, you go 3 or 4 weeks or even months with no communications whatsoever.
Do you get to do Zoom or see the family at all?
So again, the last trip we did quite a lot of it sort of inshore to the UK, and then when we were in the Mediterranean, we were quite near shore again. So if you're close enough to land and you've got a good enough signal, people were doing FaceTimes and with their families when they could. But that's sort of more of an opportunistic basis rather than anything sort of set in stone. But no, if you dive for long periods of time doing operations, it's just maybe an email, but maybe nothing. And then post-wise, we don't really. So surface ships, when they go into a foreign port, they get like post delivered, and that's a big thing they do all the time. Submarines don't really tend to do it. I think maybe because we don't know when we're going into port, and we go into port less often. We don't really tend to get scheduled post in, and quite often we'll go into port only with maybe 2 or 3 days notice. So there's not enough time to fly the post out to us before we then sail off somewhere else. So we don't tend to quite do that as much as the surface fleet.
We've got lots of questions coming in now. Working backwards, how do you keep fit?
Well, we do have fitness equipment on board, and that's spread between the front end and the back end of the submarine, and that ranges from sort of spinning bikes to sort of free weights. With I think the back after they've got the Olympic bar as well, with plates to put on, rower, so you can fit it in, but I think it's because it eats into your sleep time, so it's whether you're willing to give up some sleep time to go work out. I personally choose sleep, but that's
So you don't have any criteria. You don't have to be a certain fitness level to carry on doing what you do.
So we have a fitness test we have to do once a year, which you have to run 1.5 miles, or do like the bleep test for shuttle run, and then depending on your age, you have to get a certain level. But once you're away at sea, they don't test your fitness. Just sort of go. It's a bit obviously when you're at sea, and then when you come back, you have to build it back up again.
Okay. Now somebody's asked, do you do you stay in the same time zone throughout the time you are away? I wouldn't have thought so, but how do you cope with that?
So when I was on Artful previously, we went to the States. We did a Atlantic transit, and on the way there, we stayed in British time the whole way, and basically we got alongside, and then the clocks just I can't remember exactly what it was. It was like submarine time was 7 o'clock in the evening, and we got alongside, and they just changed the clocks, and suddenly it was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which kind of works because everyone, as soon as you get alongside, everyone usually goes out for dinner or food or drinks. So body clocks are all over the place anyway. And then when we sailed back from America back to the UK, we changed the hour every time zone we changed. So basically, the hour you lost, they'd stagger half an hour each side of the watch change. Basically, every 3 or 4 days, you'd lose a half an hour's sleep. I think it's the captain's decision which one he prefers. I think from a cruise point of view, most people would prefer to stay in the same time zone the whole time. I know I definitely would, because for planning stuff, it's much easier staying in the same time zone. And then basically you hit the wall, you go alongside. Everyone's going to be tired and a bit hungover the first night anyway, and so it doesn't make a huge difference.
But presumably, most of you don't know where you're going.
So again, it depends what we're doing, where we're going. So the people who work in the control room will always know where we are and where we're going. Other people out around the submarine might not quite know quite as much. I mean, it all varies of how far in advance people know where you're going. So it depends where your role is on board, really.
Are you allowed alcohol on board?
Not while we sail. Some boats do allow it, but our boat in particular is dry once we sail, so it's typically an outpin hand grenade.
Okay, and how? One of them is asking, do you have freezers on board? And
Yes,
do the motors make too much noise?
No, so we have a large walk-in fridge and freezer on board, along with plenty of other dry stores and pretty much every other.
And given your shift patterns, is that the same shift pattern for the whole deployment?
People can change.
Yeah, so normally it's the same shift pattern you do for the whole time, but sometimes you do change. So again, the last trip we did, I ended up changing watches 3 times throughout 6 months. When you change watches, it really throws you, because obviously your body is used to one thing, and then you basically lose loads of sleep, and then you swap watches. So they try to avoid doing that, but sometimes.
Somebody's asked why 4 times 6 shifts rather than 3 times 8.
Yeah, I totally agree. 3 times 8 would make a lot more sense and make people a lot less tired. I don't know. It's what has always been done. I think people occasionally bring it up to like the Navy. Why do we do this? Maybe it will change one day, but that's what we do for now.
So the Americans do. The American boats do a 3 times 8 system, and marine engineers that operate the nuclear reactor, they do a 3 times 8, so they can get the requisite amount of sleep that they need to operate the nuclear reactor safely. But in order to go to a 3 times 8 system, you need essentially 3 separate watches without absolutely ruining people's sleep in a cyclic nature. So 4 by 6, we can do it with 2 times the amount of people as opposed to having 3 times the amount of people. The Americans, they fit a lot more people. It's a much more of a sardine tin, their submarines, in order to get the 3x8.
And we've got a doctor here who wants to know how many medics are on board and how comprehensive is your kit?
Yeah, so we have predominantly we'll sail with one senior 8 medic, which would be myself, and then I'll have a junior medic with me, and then also sometimes we will have a doctor on board, depending where we're going and what we're doing. But the last trip it was just me and my junior medic. Reference kit on board. We have what we need. I've got anything to deal with a trauma on board. So if someone has an accident, I'm more than capable to deal with that. Same with if someone had a cardiac arrest, I can deal with that as well. I also have a range of drugs, lotions, potions, depending what gets presented to me. I'm normally got enough of what I need to be able to treat pretty much everyone on board, and obviously I'll make sure I've got all my stock in place ready before we sail, so I know I'm not going to run out, especially with things like paracetamol and ibuprofen. We go through that like goodness knows what, so I have to ration it a little bit. Go, do you really need it? Probably not. Just drink some more water, you'll be all right. But yeah, we have plenty of kit, and I think we adapt to what we've got on board as well.
What's the hardest part with keeping the fresh water and keeping that sort of those levels up for people?
I think we almost make too much fresh water because we've got the nuclear reactor. We have so much power. We can just use electrolysis to generate fresh water and pure water from the seawater around us. So we have a limitless supply. The issue is getting rid of it, because pumping the wastewater overboard is noisy. So that's why we have to limit the water that we use when we're washing and drinking and so forth.
And now I've got, where can you not take the sub around the world? Where can you not take it? I don't know.
You can take something anywhere. That's the best thing of a submarine, is you can say there's a submarine somewhere and there might not be a submarine there or not. So where there's water, you can send a submarine. So the only thing that's going to restrict a submarine is the depth of water. If there's enough water to sail a submarine in whilst it's dived, you can sail a submarine in anywhere, which is why lots of countries value them, because you can go and do lots of stuff and not declare it.
Not that you ever do anything like that.
Oh, no, of course we would never do that. No.
Is there also dentists on board?
No, so no dentist. I've done a 1-day course in dentistry as part of my training, so I can do temporary fillings and deal with sort of any trauma to the mouth, and then my priority would be to get them seen alongside. However, we do have a rigorous they have dental checkups before sailing, so everyone is supposed to be in date for a dental checkup with a professional before sailing, so that way we know they're safe prior to sailing. And then normally it's a chipped tooth that I normally have to deal with,
and lots of ibuprofen and paracetamol.
Yeah, they'll be fine.
So what is the crew size?
So I think the minimum people you need on board to sail it is 98. But we never sail without few. We've always got trainees or extra people on board. So I think we normally sail about, well, you probably know more than me, about 120.
Yeah, average I think for a boat is about 120. Can be a bit higher and a little bit lower, but yeah, average about 120.
We've got 101 beds on board, so that'll tell you how the level we're dealing with.
What's the width of the average? Are all the beds the same sort of width and length and stuff? So if you're very tall, it's a problem, isn't it?
A single bed's probably too
smaller than a single bed.
Yeah, it's like a bunk bed, basically, like a small child's bunk bed.
Yeah. Slightly wider than shoulder width, I would say, is the kind of width of them.
Perish the thought, I can't better even think of that one. And then somebody says, how quickly can you get someone off the sub if needed?
It depends where we are and what we're doing, but yeah, I have done previously. I was still writing the medical notes, and there was a helicopter above ready, and I wasn't ready. So it can be really quick. However, we may need to do prolonged care, and just I have to maintain that patient. If it was a patient, obviously, if it was just for other reasons, then we just try and get them off whenever we can.
Because presumably there are long periods of radio silence that you've got to maintain regardless.
Yeah.
And there must be times when you have to check in, or set times, and then people start to worry if you haven't, or...
Yeah, so basically it works. The captain's empowered. He gets given the mission and he goes away. And the captain isn't required to check in at any stage. The Royal Navy sends signals that you have to read at certain intervals. And you are responsible that you have to read these signals because it might give you a change of mission or someone needs to get off or whatever. So if the captain knows he's missed these signals, he then has to make comms and say, I've missed this signal, what have I missed, sort of thing. But if everything goes to plan, which touch wood, most of the time it does, the captain never checks in. We just receive these signals passively, basically, and then go and do whatever we're being tasked to do.
Right. Okay. Can't quite read that one. Oh, do all the crew take part in the fifth watch?
Yeah, no. So different departments on board are different sizes. So like the ME, so the guys who are in charge of the nuclear reactor, there's lots of them, and you require lots of them in a maintenance period because there's lots of maintenance and work going on. But when you go to sea, you only require X number of people. So they're usually the people who get the most fifth watch. And then depending on your department, how many people there are and how many trainees. So like the captain will never get fifth watch, the XO will never get fifth watch. Neither of the navigators or the watch leaders probably do. Like the junior warfare officers, so the job I did previously, sometimes do. The MAs sometimes do. You do.
Yeah, we have. So yeah, we have two of each. There's 2 senior eights and 2 junior medics, so we can switch out. So half will be fifth watch, half that's.
And then the WEs, maybe the junior guys.
So
Officers very rarely get fifth watch, but the sort of ratings get it more often.
Book or iPad?
Or
Books or
iPads, because you
iPad?
can. Well, Kindle, to be honest, because you can fit many books in.
Because we were talking to some in the past, and they said, "Oh, they still have to have a book because they don't want to feel the pages turning, even though they're reading."
But I personally take a couple of like books that you've all got a couple of books that you know you can read and reread. So I'll take a couple of them as a backstop, but then I've got a Kindle with many more loaded on.
There's a cracking
particular
glass seller question there, Master, from Ed Ashmead Grant. What is the one thing you see on an American sub that you would love to have? What is the one thing you have on Artful which the Americans would like to have?
So I think the Americans have lots of money, so they can obviously spend lots of really, really cool kit on the submarines.
So you have to speak up again. Yeah.
Sorry, the Americans obviously have loads of money, so they can spend loads of stuff on their submarines. So they've got lots of really, really cool kits and capabilities that we don't have, but we probably can't speak about in this forum. But probably the best thing they do have is they have like the Mr. Whippy ice cream machines, so they can literally like go to their messes and just get like a 99 like ice cream, which is like incredible, really, isn't it? Like, that's pretty I don't think they want anything from us. They've got like all of the good stuff.
But don't you have to make sure that you can get out when you come back to shore with all those whippy ice cream?
yeah. You have to be able to fit out the main access hatch. Yeah, which for some people that is actually a struggle.
Well,
yeah.
On that as well. So last trip I ran a biggest loser, so I was encouraging weight loss to happen. So yeah, they can fit out the hatch at the end.
That brings us
Got
back
any
to
other
the torpedo
questions, anybody?
tubes.
Mark, have you got any other questions you can
I was
spot?
just going to say that business about weight just brings us back to the torpedo tube exit route, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Fire 'em out.
Somebody's asked, is it noisy to work in the submarine?
I think it depends where you are. So if you're back aft in the kind of engineering spaces, you've got a lot of kind of high pressure steam going through valves, and there it can be quite noisy. There's certain areas that we have to wear ear defenders when the submarine's going, but certainly almost all of the front half of the submarine is like perfectly fine. You'll occasionally get the odd hiss or valve movement somewhere, but in terms of hearing water pass by, you honestly wouldn't know you're moving.
Do you get affected by the currents? Rocking. Someone asked that. Does the boat rock ever underwater?
Yeah, so when you're at periscope depth, again, just below the
Sorry,
surface.
come back.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you're like at periscope depth just below the surface, it's very, very rocky. So unlike a ship that's like a V, which obviously has some sort of resistance, because we're round bottom, you corkscrew, so you go all over the place. When you're dived and deep underwater, you honestly wouldn't know you're at sea. Only when you change depth and you pitch up and down, would you know you're at sea. You honestly can't feel any roughness at all. The only caveat is if there's a massive storm above you, it's amazing how deep the storm affects the sort of the boat. So again, when we did this America trip, a hurricane went over the top of us, and we were in excess of 100 meters deep. And you could feel the wave of the water from it. So normally don't feel anything, but if there's extreme weather, you can feel it from quite deep. Yeah.
Have you hit anything you shouldn't have done and you're going to own up to?
I haven't hit anything, which is why I'm leaving the submarine soon and not having been fired. So I've done what I needed to do, which was not hit anything.
It's been close though.
How many females do you have on the submarine normally?
So currently we're down in numbers a little bit, but however, sort of last trip we were at 15 at one point, which is quite a lot. I think if you look at the other boats within the fleet, that was quite a good chunk. However, I think we're down to 6-ish now. So it does vary, and obviously it depends if people are going on draft or coming back. So it does fluctuate.
So do you specialize for being a submariner? If you just as a female, do they need to have a certain percentage of the crew as female? Or...
No, and Artful has been very good with that, and we're fully integrated, and there's been no divide. My bunk space is all male, and me. And yeah, if we can divide females and give them their own little bit of space, we will, but it's not priority because we're there to do the job. So ultimately we will just crack on and share the same bathrooms as the guys as well.
Do you work under reduced oxygen? And if so, how does it affect you?
No, so we don't actually. We work at the normal sort of oxygen rate. We can reduce it, and we have like set limits, which would be a no-no. And obviously, again, too high, it would be explosive. So we do keep that fine balance. And that is something which is my job to monitor 4 hourly the whole time at sea, just to make sure. And it is the same with all the other sort of atmosphere, like carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and all the other ingredients in the atmosphere. So I will keep an eye on it and make sure we're hitting the right levels and that everyone's going to be breathing in what they should be breathing in.
The same thing with the radiation levels and things like that. People may or may not be exposed to.
Yeah, so I mean, because the A boats are so new, the radiation levels are very low in comparison to the V class and T class. So it doesn't really concern me too much on the A boats. I don't really have much trouble with that. However, if it is slightly higher, if we're running at a bit of a higher power, we'll just block off certain areas just to make sure no one's sat in a place for a long period of time in gaining more of a dose. And obviously they have the symmetry on, which will record all their dose, which gets sent off every sort of 4 months or so, and that's all recorded on their records as well.
I think, and you can slap me down if I'm wrong here, but I think I'm right in saying that because we've got a whole bunch of ocean between us and all of the atmospheric radiation, we actually receive less of a dose when we're away than everyone else does back at home. We've got someone's just there we go. Yeah, there we go.
There we go. We're back here.
Yeah, you're quite right. So, for example, if anyone lives in Cornwall, you'd probably get a higher dose of radiation than us actually at sea on a submarine.
They think they're going out to live in the countryside, and it's far better for them.
No, not down in Cornwall. It's not.
Now, I've got a question for you, and that reads very simply: how can the Glovers best support you?
I think honestly, it's events like this. It's allowing us to kind of get the information about what we do and how we do it out into public. I mentioned it with the whole recruiting. It's we really struggle to get people in. It's because people don't know what we do. And like I mean, I think Vigil's been mentioned once today, that BBC show, but it did wonders for actually getting people to have a look into our world. So giving us these opportunities to come and speak to you guys. And if you can pass that on, and maybe somewhere down the line, it will inspire someone to join up and like join the ranks, as it were. It's genuinely, that's how you can best help, is just spreading the message of what we do.
Well, you're very welcome to come anytime you'd like to talk to us, because we normally just see you, or a few of you, very, very briefly over a lunch, and then you go back off out to do other things, probably in local bars and pubs in London, but but you're very, very welcome, and it's a real treat having you here today to share with us. And I think the glass sellers must say, Barbara, can you hear me? Master glass seller?
She'll be muted.
Oh. Do unmute yourself and say hello.
Where are you?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. It's been wonderful to join the Glovers, to be able to talk to the three of you. It really gives us an insight into what you do, and we're so grateful for that, because you do a fantastic job. And I know for one, I could never be in one of those bunk beds. So thank you for doing it for us.
There's a question here from Paul saying the crew did a great video on board for on Christmas, showing what it was like. Do you sort of get a, well, first, do you know what the date is, and do you actually get a chance to have a Christmas dinner and a Christmas party or whatever you do on board?
I think we were all fortunate we weren't on the submarine when we did last Christmas. Sorry. I think we were all fortunate enough that none of us were on board last Christmas when they missed Christmas. But normally they take the time, if they can, to have at least a Christmas lunch and put some decorations up and do all that sort of stuff. So we try and make the most out of it. It just depends what you want, what you're doing, really. But really, it's just any other day with some turkey, really.
Oh, because you did a great video, apparently.
Yeah, so I think I remember people vaguely mentioning it, but none of us were there, unfortunately, so I can't remember exactly what was sent. No.
Well, Paul talks about it.
There was no, I think it was on the shared drive. I remember having a look at it over, and yeah, certainly I imagine that's something we could probably repeat on the next sea trip if we're away. Hopefully we won't be away for Christmas this next one, but you never know.
Somebody got another question?
Yeah, Master, can I just say, it's lovely to see Guy on the screen here. He was Master Glass Seller when I was Master Glover in 2012-13, and we both went up to Barrow to see the Artful being built, which was a huge privilege. And somebody, I think, has already asked the question. I think it was Louise, actually. How can the Glovers help the Artful crew?
We've already had an answer to that one, Chris.
Right.
They've very kindly said that we should be promoting more of what they do and doing things like that. Fine. So we hope to get them to do more of this stuff for us.
Excellent.
In the future, because they're very, very welcome. And it just saves a lot of time and effort with traveling as well, I think, something like this. And I think we've got 47 screens, which is brilliant. And there are more people here that would perhaps get to have the opportunity to talk to all the three of you were you at an event, because we'd have to form a long queue and you'd give everybody 2 minutes only. But it's just absolutely fantastic. We've had such a turnout. Has anybody got any, have you got something else to say, Chris? No, Chris hasn't got anything else to say. Has anybody else got any other questions?
May I say, Master, how very nice it is to see Chris, and also to see Pamela, my mother's next door neighbours. It would be absolutely wonderful if we could perhaps organise a joint event between our two companies. You know, I have and also, of course, get some of the crew down. because I have so enjoyed my visit with Chris up to the naming ceremony and, of course, the commissioning.
Wonderful. Master, Barbara, shall we talk about this?
We should indeed. I've already suggested to our company that it would be nice to go up to Barrow again, because it was just out of this world to see the submarines being constructed. So yes, we should talk and we should see what we could do together.
Wonderful. Now there you are, gentlemen. You've got us queuing to come and visit you at some stage.
Hopefully you will be
We'd love to have you all up.
there. There are 2 or 3 more questions on the screen.
There are.
Lewis, somebody's asked, how much is the Mr. Whipping machine?
However much is so worth it. It needs more. That's how much. Absolutely worth it.
Or may I suggest a slushy machine? Because previously, when I was on ships, I know ships don't talk about them, but when I was on a ship, we actually got a slushy machine and then I left. So we need to get one back.
What is the longest time any of you have been underwater without a break?
Yeah, so that might be me. Yeah, probably on a V-boat patrol, 116 days.
Wow. When you get off a ship, you all sort of get off feeling a bit wobbly. What's it like when you get off a submarine? Do you feel?
Yeah, no, it's the opposite, isn't it?
Yeah, I think because we're blessed to be underneath a lot of the turbulence, as it were. When we come alongside, unless we've been on the surface for a bit on the way back in, and it's been like bad weather on the way back in, it's normally just step right off and no problems. Apart from the jet lag, there's really not really any issue.
Fantastic. No,
Master, if I can just, sorry, Michael Orr here. I do remember talking about getting together with the ship's company and the glass sellers. In the past, when people have come down in November for the Submariners Remembrance, we have got together with the glass sellers and entertained them for supper or something like that. And perhaps that is something we should think about doing again. Because if you're going to be sending people, I think the normal practice is for you to send somebody down in November for the remembrance ceremony. And it would be, if you're going to be coming down to London anyway, let's get together.
Why not?
Oh no, that certainly sounds like a good idea.
If as the liaison officer, if you can try and sort that out for us and talk to me, Lewis or William or Lou for that matter, yeah, go for that.
I think it's normally the weekend before Remembrance Sunday or in the week before Remembrance Sunday, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It's for weekend before normal Remembrance. Yeah, so usually the first weekend of November.
And for those who don't know, there's a ceremony at the Submariners Memorial on the embankment.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, we normally do like a parade at Middle Temple Gardens, and then the Submariners Memorial is on the Thames, just opposite that. And we just sort of go there and lay all the wreaths. And on the Saturday, there's usually a memorial service at Westminster Abbey as well.
Well, we see what we can do. Barbara, when do you finish your term?
December.
Right. Well, I finished mine at the sort of start of November, so we can try and sort something out before then.
Yes, definitely.
If you chaps are willing and able.
And around.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. We'd love to do that. That'd be really, really good.
Be brilliant.
There are a couple more questions up there.
Are there? What does the welfare charity do? Is the question.
So we have a welfare committee on board, which we receive lots of funds from different places that get put into sort of a pot, and then it gets used for lots of events really. So normally the ship's company through the XO, who's the second in command, decides what to do. So if the submarine's been away for a long time, sometimes we organise like homecomings. So They might put on like a barbecue or an event so the families can welcome everyone home. Or I know previously in the summer they've done like a whole submarine barbecue, which you bring your partners and your kids, and they do like a big barbecue and games and all that sort of stuff. So it really does what it says on the tin. Really, it's a fund of money that we can use for whatever we want to kind of better our families and our own sort of lives, really.
And what is the protocol on social media for the crew, both shoreside and when on operation?
Well, I'm sure you can imagine that the Navy's got their kind of PR company, and especially with current events, we're all given briefs on what we can and can't say with regards to that. But when we go to sea, everyone's there's a kind of an amnesty for bringing mobile phones down to the platform. And then when we sail, once the hatches are shut, you're not going to be getting signal anyway. So people like to typically like store music or whatever on the phones and kind of listen to it in their off watch. But no, aside from what I would imagine is similar for pretty much every modern company with a PR department, we have certain things that we can and can't say and do. But apart from that, there's not many restrictions.
And someone's asked if the crew wear gloves. Do you?
Well, certainly, I know the people up on the casing do not, as they don't want to have the ropes catch in them. But no, I know certainly with in your department.
Yeah, I have a habit of wearing latex gloves, but other than that, I mean, especially being in Faz Lane during the winter, I wear gloves to work, walking to work, because sometimes it can be like -4 in the mornings walking to work. So definitely wear gloves in the winter.
Somebody's found videos. Now, who's that? I found videos we showed, and that's on YouTube. Oh, we can share if we like. So I shall speak to Paul and find out where they are. Obviously, the Christmas video.
It's the one I picked up off of YouTube, and we showed it Christmas before last. It's life on board the Royal on board Artful. It's only about 1:17 if you want to show it.
Oh, right.
Mark, can you allow me to share the screen?
Gone for dinner.
Has he?
I think
Have
Mark's
you got
had
control, David?
I have.
Can you do share screen?
We'll soon
We'll have a go.
We'll soon find out.
I'll try now.
Aha.
I haven't got the sound.
Here she comes. This isn't the Christmas one.
Just a second. That's not worked as it should do. Let's try again.
Can you mute us just in case we...
That's better. Try again. Let's see if I've got sound on here. That's it.
And here.
Right. Right. We're in business, I think.
This is Marine Engineer's bunk space on board a submarine. In here, you've got beds, or as we call them, racks. Each rack has a little curtain, so you've got a bit of privacy. So when you come in here to sleep, you can lock the world away. In there, you can read books, or if you've got a laptop, watch a film or two. Let me show you the rest of the submarine. Just like all the big stars, we've got ensuite facilities with sinks and even showers. This is the galley where they provide food for the whole crew. Once you've got your food, you need somewhere to eat it. So we've got a senior HMS, or for the likes of myself, a junior HMS. In here, you can just relax. You have a TV where you can watch things from a hard drive, so TV shows and films, as we don't have an aerial. Along with that, we've got a second TV rigged up to a PS4, sometimes an Xbox where you can play FIFA the night away. So this is my crib.
Fantastic. Thank you, Paul.
Not overly Christmassy.
No, it wasn't at the time, but it was a demonstration of what it was like. And I think if the crew and members can do things like that for our members, we can certainly give them a pictorial view of what it's like, and to encourage them to promote the work what they do.
I've got one or two last questions. I'm conscious of the time, and I'll quickly ask you, what was your family's,
there we go.
what was your family's reaction when you told them you were going to become a submariner?
Well, I'd say utter dismay from my mother. My dad was in the RAF, so he had a bit more truck with it. But no, I was thankfully recently with COVID restrictions finally leaving, I was able to get them both down the submarine for the first time, and so now they have somewhat of a kind of picture of what I get up to, and they have a bit more truck with it, so to speak. But
what about you, Lou?
Yeah, obviously previously being on ships, my parents are used to me going away, as well as the rest of my family. Yeah, when I sort of first mentioned doing it, my dad is a bit of a nutter like me, so he was like, yeah, obviously you're going to go do that. And my mum was quite concerned, but she'd come around to it, and now I think she would be very disappointed if I did leave the submarine service.
All right. And Liz, what about you?
I don't think they knew what to expect really. So I don't come from a military background or anything like that. So I was like, I'm going to go join a submarine. And they're like, all right, okay, cool. And then I was like, oh, I'm not going to speak to you for like 4 months. And they're like, oh, right, okay. So I think they've yeah, exactly. They've got used to it now and know what they do and all that sort of stuff. But I think to begin with, they just didn't really know what to think really.
Why do you keep coming back to the Artful?
Because it's a really, really good boat with some really, really good affiliates. And that's where I want to be. It's just good. I don't want to go to the V-boat class because they tend to go away to sea for like really, really long periods. So, 116 days with no communications with your family these days is quite a short patrol. These days it's more like 150, 160, and each time one goes away it gets longer and longer. And the last trip we did, we were away for 5 months. We went into Gibraltar twice. We were on the surface quite a lot. It's just different operations. It's more fast paced. You do more fast paced stuff. So I'd like to come back to an A-boat again.
I think I'll call it one last question, and then I'll call it quits, folks, and hand you over to David to say goodbye and thank you all. How do you hear current news and current news affairs? Well, I must admit, I turn the radio off or the television off because there's too much rubbish. Go on. Do you have a sort of news bulletin or something?
Yes, so we have as part of kind of it depends obviously where we are on as to what kind of communications we can use to receive things, but we can go all the way from having like a very slow internet connection, which will drip feed us. They have kind of a daily summary of various news, or if we're somewhere else and we don't have that option, then we'll get kind of maybe a couple of bullet points of headlines. Typically the football scores will feature quite high up in the priority, but we'll get drips and drabs, and then when we're somewhere else and we can get the internet function back, we'll get kind of we'll get it all kind of dropped in a large dump of everything that we've missed. But certainly I know when we come back up to the surface, everyone's up with their phones trying to kind of find out what's gone on in certain times.
Just like Dad said as well, it depends which boat you're on. I've had it previously where, you're getting the news come through, but people getting the signals through and writing it out will like to throw in a bit of fake news just to really confuse you, so you don't know what's real and what's not, and you can't find out till you get back, so you just have to work it out for yourself.
Anyway, I'd like to thank you guys. It's been tremendous, and I thank David as well for organising it and getting this whole thing off the ground. For those of you who've all logged in, thank you very, very much. We're hoping that we will raise sufficient funds to make a bit of a donation to your welfare fund for when you get back, or decide to have a barbecue, or perhaps even a whipping machine. Goodness knows how much.
That's really, really kind. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
But it was absolutely fantastic. David, over to you. Or Barbara, would you like to say something before we finish?
On behalf of the glass sellers, I'd like to wish everybody bon voyage and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And David, over to you.
Yes, thanks, guys. Can't tell you how much we appreciate this, and you've taken time out of whatever you were doing to talk to us. And if you can take back a message to the XO about the Affiliates Day, maybe sometime in the future. It was mentioned Southampton, whatever you can do. But thank you so much.
We'll take that away, definitely. That'll be good.
Yes, you've got my email address. Lewis is unfortunately leaving us very shortly, but do keep in touch, like via my email address. And
Lewis knows. You might regret saying that.
Yes.
Well, thanks again, guys. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.